My name is Dr. Irene Callahan, and I am 37 years old. 5 years ago, my sister told our parents I was addicted to prescription drugs and had been expelled from medical school. She said I had been stealing pain medication and spiraling out of control. It was a lie, but it was a believable one in a country that had grown used to opioid headlines and ruined lives. My parents believed her without asking me a single question. They cut me off. They blocked my number. They sent my graduation invitation back unopened. They were not at my wedding. For 5 years, I was no one's daughter. Then, last January, my trauma pager went off at 2:47 in the morning, and the name that flashed across the intake screen was Monica Callahan. When I walked into the surgical waiting room in bloodstained scrubs after operating for nearly 4 hours, my mother grabbed my father's arm so hard it left bruises. They thought I had destroyed my life. That night, I was the only thing standing between my sister and death. The rain had been freezing against the hospital windows when the pager went off. Level 1 trauma, female, mid-30s, motor vehicle collision, unstable vitals. I rolled out of bed before the second vibration. My husband Daniel mumbled something into his pillow. I told him I would call when I could. He was used to it. Trauma does not wait for daylight. The roads into Hartford were slick and empty streetlights blurring through the windshield. I ran through the case in my head the way I always did. Blunt abdominal trauma meant spleen or liver. Unstable meant bleeding. Fast hands, clear head. I badged in through the ambulance bay and headed straight to the trauma station. My team was already assembling. 2 residents, anesthesia on standby blood bank, alerted. The charge nurse handed me the tablet with the incoming chart. I swiped once. Monica Callahan, date of birth, March 14th, 1988. Emergency contact Robert Callahan, father. For 3 seconds, the hallway noise dropped away. The fluorescent lights hummed. My own name echoed somewhere behind my ribs. I had not heard my sister's name spoken in a hospital context before. Not like that. Not as a patient. Dr. Callahan, you good? Linda asked quietly at my shoulder. I am fine, I said. Prep Bay 2. Page Dr. Patel and note a potential conflict of interest in the chart. Policy mattered. Even when blood was about to hit the floor, the ambulance doors burst open with a rush of cold air. The stretcher came in fast. Monica was strapped down, oxygen mask fogging with shallow breaths, dark blood soaking through the silk of what looked like an evening blouse. Her face was pale under streaks of rain and glass dust. One hand hung limp over the rail. Paramedics rattled off numbers, blood pressure dropping, heart rate climbing, abdomen rigid, possible internal bleed. Behind them, I heard my father's voice raised and raw. That is my daughter. I need the chief doctor. Get me the chief right now. I did not turn around. Not yet. My job was on the table. We moved her into the trauma bay. Ultrasound confirmed what I already suspected. Free fluid in the abdomen. Likely splenic rupture, maybe worse. We are going to surgery, I said. Now. As they wheeled her toward the operating room, I caught a glimpse through the glass partition. My mother stood in the hallway in her winter coat thrown over a nightgown, hair unbrushed, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. My father was arguing with a nurse, demanding updates, demanding authority. He had always demanded authority. She is all we have, I heard him say, voice cracking, in a way I had never heard before. All we have. The words slid through me like cold water. For 5 years, I had been erased from their sentences. I had stopped expecting to be included. Hearing it out loud still stung. In the scrub room, I gave myself 30 seconds. Water ran hot over my hands. The stainless steel mirror warped my reflection. I saw a woman in surgical blues, hair tucked under a cap, eyes steady. I also saw the 22-year-old who had stood in a dorm hallway 5 years earlier, listening to her father say, "Do not call this house again until you are ready to tell the truth." I shut that memory down. There was no room for it here. If she dies tonight, it will not be, because I hesitated. I pushed through the operating room doors. Surgery reduces people to anatomy and physiology. It strips away history. Monica was no longer my sister. She was a ruptured spleen and a falling blood pressure. We opened her abdomen, and the blood welled up fast and dark. The residents moved with sharp focus, suction, clamp, retract, spleen shattered. We removed it. There was a liver laceration as well, not as bad as it could have been, but bleeding enough to matter. I stitched layer by layer, deliberate and calm. Anesthesia called out numbers. Blood transfusions ran. At one point, my resident glanced up at me, as if checking for something, a tremor. Maybe a sign that the name on the chart meant more to me than it should. My hands did not shake. They never had. 5 years ago, they believed I was high in a dorm room somewhere in Arizona stealing pills and ruining my future. Tonight, I was standing under surgical lights, reconstructing the inside of my sister's body with precision and control. Life has a way of circling back. 3 hours and 48 minutes. After the first incision, I placed the final stitch. Her vitals stabilized, blood pressure steady, heart rate controlled. Dr. Patel stepped closer and pulled down his mask. "You want me to speak to the family?" "No," I said. "I will handle it." I washed my hands slowly, watching diluted pink swirl down the drain. I removed my gloves and mask left the scrub cap on. My badge hung against my chest. Dr. Irene Callahan, MD-FACS Chief of Trauma Surgery. The letters were small but readable from a distance. The hallway to the waiting room felt longer than usual. Other families sat scattered under fluorescent lights, eyes lifted in quiet hope whenever a doctor approached. I pushed through the double doors. My parents were seated in the middle row. My father stood as soon as he saw me, reflexive, as if meeting authority head-on. "Doctor, how is she as Monica?" He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes dropped to my badge, then climbed slowly back to my face. Recognition moved across him like a physical blow. My mother followed his gaze. Her mouth fell open. For a moment, no sound came out at all. Her hand shot out and gripped my father's forearm. I saw her fingers press into the fabric of his sleeve knuckles white. Later, I would notice faint purple marks where she had held on too hard. 5 seconds passed. 5 years sat inside those 5 seconds. "Mr. and Mrs. Callahan," I said evenly. "I am Dr. Callahan, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Your daughter sustained a ruptured spleen and a significant liver laceration in the accident. Surgery was successful. She is stable and currently in the ICU." I did not say Mom. I did not say Dad. My mother took a step toward me, arms lifting, as if she might embrace me out of reflex or relief. "Irene, oh my God, Irene." I stepped back half a pace. Not dramatic, not cruel, just clear. She froze, hands hovering in the air before slowly dropping to her sides. "You are a doctor," my father said, his voice thick, almost disbelieving. "I am." "You are the chief?" "I am." But Monica said. He stopped himself. The sentence collapsed under its own weight. Monica said, "What, Dad?" He swallowed. "She said you were in rehab last year. She said you never went back to school. She said you did not want us to see you like that." The waiting room hummed quietly around us. Somewhere behind me, a television murmured the early morning weather report. I felt strangely calm, as if the worst part had already happened 5 years ago, and this was only the echo. "None of that was true," I said. "Not then. Not now." My mother covered her mouth with her hand. My father stared at my badge again, as if it might disappear if he blinked. Through the glass doors behind me, I could see ICU staff moving down the corridor. My shift was not over. My patient was not out of danger yet. "You will be able to see her in about an hour," I continued. "The nurses will update you when she is ready." I turned to leave. "Irene," my mother said softly, voice breaking. I paused but did not turn around. "We thought I know what you thought I said. We can talk about it later." I walked back toward the ICU corridor spine, straight steps measured. Behind me, I heard nothing. Not my father's authority. Not my mother's sobbing. Just silence. Monica was alive. The truth was not. Not yet. And 5 years of lies do not unravel in a single morning under hospital lights. We grew up in a narrow 2-story house just outside Albany, the kind with aluminum siding that rattled in the wind, and a front porch my father repainted every other summer, whether it needed it or not. Our last name meant something in our town. Willett Hardware and Supply had been on Central Avenue since my grandfather came back from Korea. My father ran it like a command post. My mother handled the books from a small desk in the den. They believed in hard work Sunday service and not giving the neighbors anything to whisper about. Reputation was a currency in our house spent carefully and defended fiercely. There were 2 daughters in that house, but only one who knew how to step into a room and make it hers. Monica was 4 years older than me, and she had a kind of brightness that drew people in before she even spoke. She laughed easily, hugged relatives without hesitation, remembered everyone's birthdays. At church potluck, she moved from table to table like a candidate on the campaign trail, asking about knee surgeries and grandkids and vacation plans. People said she had presence. My father called it leadership. I was the quiet one at the end of the table, the girl with a library book open on her lap while dessert was being passed around. I was not unhappy. I just did not compete for air. When relatives asked what I was up to, I would say pre-med classes or hospital volunteering, and they would nod politely before turning back to Monica's story about organizing a fundraiser or leading a committee. One Thanksgiving, when I was 16, Monica stood in the living room, telling a story about a debate tournament she had won. My father laughed so loudly the silverware rattled in the china cabinet. He clapped her on the back and said, "That is my girl." I was in the doorway holding a pie I had baked for the first time by myself. My mother took it from my hands without looking up and said, "Put it on the counter, honey. We will cut it later." I learned early that applause had a direction in our house. That does not mean my parents did not love me. They fed me, clothed me, paid for my textbooks. But love in our home came wrapped in practicality, and attention was something you earned by being visible. Monica was visible in ways that fit neatly into my father's idea of success. I was visible in quieter ways that required patience to notice. When I made it to the regional science fair, my senior year of high school, I remember scanning the auditorium for my parents. They arrived halfway through the awards ceremony because Monica had a planning meeting for the town's Christmas parade that ran late. My father slipped into the seat beside me and whispered, "What did I miss? I had just received second place." He nodded and said, "That is good. Irene, good job," then pulled out his phone to answer a call from the store. It is strange how small moments accumulate. They do not feel like injuries at the time. They feel like weather, constant and mild. The hardware store was the center of my father's world. He talked about it the way other men talked about their sons. One night at dinner, he said, "Someday this place will need steady hands." He looked at Monica when he said it. She smiled, leaned back in her chair, and said she would never let him down. I was cutting my chicken into careful pieces and wondering if steady hands counted if they were holding a scalpel instead of a ledger. There was an unspoken assumption that Monica would stay close, that she would carry the family name forward in a visible way. I was the one who would leave for school and maybe come back for holidays. The idea that I might one day outpace her in something that mattered publicly had not fully occurred to any of us, not even me. The letter from Yale School of Medicine arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in April. I remember because it was raining, a thin, steady rain that blurred the view of the backyard through the kitchen window. My hands were shaking as I held the envelope. I had applied knowing the odds were slim, knowing we did not have connections, knowing the tuition would mean loans that would follow me for years. My father opened it at the kitchen table. He read it once silently, then again, out loud, slower. He set it down and looked at me in a way he had not before, like he was recalibrating something. Yale. He said it carefully, as if testing the weight of it. That is not a small thing, Irene. My mother pressed her hand to her chest and laughed, a sound I had never heard from her directed at me. She reached for the phone almost immediately, calling my aunt, then her sister, then Mrs. Donnelly from church. Irene got into Yale Medical School, she kept saying, her voice bright with something that felt like pride. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. At dinner that night, Monica was quiet in a way that did not match her usual rhythm. She smiled when my father toasted me with a glass of iced tea. She said she was proud of me. She asked about New Haven, about my roommates, about how long the program would take. She asked if med students partied hard, if the pressure got to people. I laughed and told her I would be too busy studying to party. She watched me as I talked, her head tilted slightly, her expression thoughtful. The weeks after my acceptance shifted something in our house. Neighbors stopped by with congratulatory cards. The pastor mentioned me in Sunday announcements. My father began introducing me differently. "This is my daughter, she is going to be a doctor." He said it with a straight back and a firm nod. Monica began calling me more often once I moved to New Haven. At first, I was grateful. I told myself this was what sisterhood felt like, this exchange of details and updates. She wanted to know the names of my classmates, the professors I admired, the hospitals where I was rotating. She asked how I handled stress, whether anyone I knew had burned out. "Do you ever take anything to stay awake during exams?" she asked once, her tone light, almost joking. "Just coffee," I said, laughing. She laughed too, but there was a pause before she changed the subject. At Christmas that first year of med school, I came home exhausted but hopeful. We were at my aunt's house, the living room crowded with cousins and casserole dishes. Someone asked me how school was going. Before I could answer fully, Monica jumped in and said, "It is brutal. You would not believe the stories Irene tells me about students cracking under pressure." She said it with a smile, like it was harmless. I corrected her gently, saying it was challenging but manageable. My father waved a hand and said, "That is why not everyone can handle it." Pride edged his voice, but there was also something else, a faint tension I could not name. Later that night, as we were packing leftovers into foil, Monica leaned against the counter beside me. "You know, Mom and Dad worry," she said quietly. "They do not understand that world. You should probably keep them in the loop so they do not assume the worst. Assume the worst about what I asked. She shrugged and said nothing. Just that med school changes people. It was a small sentence, almost nothing. But it lingered. By my third year, the pace had intensified. Clinical rotations meant early mornings and late nights. I was learning to speak to patients' families, to deliver information carefully, to hold steady when monitors beeped in the background. I called home less often because there were simply not enough hours in the day. When I did call, my mother would update me on church news, and my father would ask how my grades were. Monica would sometimes get on the line and tease me about becoming too serious. Do not forget where you came from, she would say. I never thought she meant it as a warning. Looking back now, I can see the pattern. I can see the way information moved through her. First, the way she positioned herself as translator between me and our parents. If I was late returning a call, she would tell them I was overwhelmed. If I sounded tired, she would say I was pushing myself too hard. She asked more questions than anyone else about prescriptions, about hospital policies, about whether students ever got in trouble for minor infractions. I answered without suspicion. She was my sister. Why would I guard myself against her? There is a moment before every fracture when everything still appears intact. The house stands, the walls are straight. The roof does not leak. You do not see the stress running through the beams. The last time I remember feeling uncomplicated pride in my family was a Sunday afternoon in late spring. I was home for a short break, sitting at the kitchen table with my textbooks spread out. My father came in from the store and set his keys down with a heavy sigh. He looked at me studying and said, "I tell people you're going to save lives one day." I smiled and said, "I hope so." Monica was standing in the doorway behind him. She was watching us, her expression unreadable. I did not know then that the story of who I was about to become was already being rewritten in someone else's voice. By my third year at Yale, the hospital had started to feel more like home than my own apartment. Clinical rotations have a way of stripping you down to your essentials. You learn quickly that no one cares how tired you are. The monitors still beep. The lab results still come in. The families still stand in hallways with hope hanging by a thread. I like that about it. It was honest. If you showed up and did the work spoke back. Lauren Hayes was the reason I survived that year with my sense of humor intact. She was my roommate, my study partner, the only person who knew how much coffee I could drink before my hands started to shake. Lauren had grown up in Vermont foster homes and state schools, no safety net, but the one she built herself. She had this dry wit that cut through tension like a scalpel. "If we make it through this rotation without fainting," she said once after a 14-hour shift, "we deserve a medal and a nap that lasts a week." We would sit on the floor of our apartment with flashcards scattered around us, quizzing each other until midnight. She knew when I was pushing too hard. I knew when she was pretending she was fine. The first sign that something was wrong came on an ordinary Tuesday. Lauren pressed a hand to her lower abdomen in the middle of studying and said it felt like a pulled muscle. By that weekend, she was doubled over in pain on the bathroom tile. We drove to the emergency department together, still joking about how we should be studying for exams instead of becoming patients. The CT scan room was colder than I remembered. I stood beside her bed while the technician explained the process, my voice steady, even though something in my chest was tightening. When the oncologist came in later that afternoon with a thin folder in his hand, the air shifted. Stage 4, ovarian cancer. The words hung between us. Lauren blinked once, then twice. She asked about treatment options as if she were discussing someone else's chart. I watched her absorb statistics I knew too well. Survival rates, aggressive chemotherapy, limited time. After the doctor left, she looked at me and tried to smile. "Well, that is inconvenient," she said, her voice thin. I took her hand. I remember thinking that I had spent years learning how to treat strangers, and now the only thing I wanted was to be useful to her. Lauren did not have parents who could fly in. She did not have siblings who would take over the night shift in the hospital chair. She had me. The next morning, I walked into the dean's office with dark circles under my eyes and a folder full of information. I explained the situation plainly. My roommate, my best friend, no family support. The need for a formal caregiver leave. I expected resistance. Instead, the dean leaned back in his chair and studied me quietly. "Medicine will still be here in a semester," he said. "Family is not always blood. Take care of her. We will hold your place." The paperwork was official, signed, stamped, approved for 1 semester. I would return in January with my class, no penalty, no disciplinary mark. It was as clean and legitimate as anything in that building. I moved into Lauren's room full-time. I tracked her medications, carefully logging doses in a notebook, the way we had been taught. I drove her to chemotherapy appointments and held her hair back when the nausea hit hard. I learned the layout of the oncology ward better than I ever wanted to. 3 in the morning became a familiar hour, the kind where the hallway lights dim and the vending machines hum louder than anything else. Sometimes she would wake and see me watching her, IV drip, and say, "You look like someone kicked you in the ribs." I would tell her I was fine. I did not tell her about the quiet fear that sat behind my sternum, the knowledge that time was narrowing. A week into her treatment, I called Monica. I do not know why I chose her first. Maybe because she had been asking about my life so intently. Maybe because I still believed she would understand. I told her about the diagnosis, about the leave of absence, about the dean's approval. She was silent for a long moment. Then her voice softened in a way that almost made me cry. "Oh, Irene, that is awful. You are doing the right thing. Mom and Dad would just worry if they knew all the details. Let me handle that. I will tell them you're taking a short break." I felt relieved. I told her everything: the hospital name, the chemo schedule, the medications Lauren was prescribed. I even mentioned that I was picking up pain prescriptions from the pharmacy downstairs because Lauren was too weak to stand in line. "Are those strong?" The meds, she asked casually, "the kind people get hooked on. They are strong if misused." I said, a little surprised. "But they are necessary. I am monitoring everything." She hummed thoughtfully and then changed the subject to the weather in Albany. 3 days later, my phone lit up at 11:32 at night. I was sitting in a hard plastic chair beside Lauren's hospital bed. She had reacted badly to the latest round of chemo, and they had admitted her overnight for observation. The room was dim, except for the monitor glow. Dad was calling. I stepped into the hallway so I would not wake her. The floor smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. I answered on the second ring. "Your sister told us everything," he said, his voice so controlled it almost did not sound like him. Everything about what I asked, my heart already beating too fast. About you dropping out, about the drugs, about the lies. The words did not make sense at first. They slid past my ears like a language I did not recognize. "Dad, I am on a caregiver leave," I told Monica. "The dean approved it. I can send you the paperwork." Monica showed us the messages he cut in. She showed us proof. "You have been suspended, Irene, for stealing medication from the hospital, for abusing prescriptions." My back pressed against the cool wall. I stared at the exit sign above the door as if it could anchor me. That is not true. I am sitting outside Lauren's hospital room right now. She has stage 4 cancer. I am picking up her prescriptions because she cannot stand up. I have documentation for everything. "Your sister said you would have a story ready," he replied. "She said you would blame it on someone else." Mom's voice came on the line, trembling but firm. "How could you lie to us for months? We defended you to everyone." I felt something inside me fracture quietly. "I am not lying. Call the dean. Call the hospital. I will give you every number you need." There was a pause long enough for the monitor down the hall to beep 3 times. "Do not insult us by doubling down," Dad said finally. "You have embarrassed this family enough." The line went dead. I stood there staring at my phone, the call duration still visible. 4 minutes and some seconds. That was all it took for the ground beneath me to shift. 20 minutes later, a text came through from Monica. "I tried to protect you, but they deserve to know. I could not keep covering for you." I read it twice, then a third time. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A nurse pushed a cart past me without looking up. Inside Lauren's room, the IV pump beeped steadily, faithful and indifferent. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor of that hospital corridor, my scrubs wrinkling beneath me. In one room, my best friend was fighting for her life. In another part of the state, my own life was being dismantled piece by piece. I did not yet understand how far the story had traveled or how many people had already begun to believe it. But I knew one thing with a clarity that felt like ice. This was not a misunderstanding. And it was only beginning. The next 5 days felt like trying to shout through thick glass, while everyone on the other side chose not to hear me. I did not sleep that night in the hospital. I sat beside Lauren and watched the rise and fall of her chest, my mind replaying every word my father had said. Suspended, stealing medication, drugs. The accusations were so far from the truth that they almost felt absurd, and yet they had landed with terrifying certainty in his voice. The next morning, I stepped into the stairwell and called home again. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. I left a message, my voice careful, steady. "Dad, please call the dean. Please. I can email you the documentation right now. This is a misunderstanding." By the third call that afternoon, the number was blocked. I stared at my phone, hit redial again out of habit, and heard the automated message telling me the call could not be completed. A cold quiet settled in my chest. I sent an email to my father first, short and factual. Attached the official letter from the dean approving my caregiver leave. Included the registrar's contact information. Then I sent a longer one to my mother explaining Lauren's diagnosis, the chemo schedule, the prescriptions I was picking up on her behalf. I wrote every detail, clearly believing that clarity would fix this. There was no response. On the second day, I tried my mother's number. It rang once, then silence. Blocked. I called Monica. She answered on the fourth ring. "Why are you doing this?" I asked without preamble. "You know none of it is true." She sighed softly, as if I were exhausting her. "Irene, you have to understand how it looks. You told me you were picking up narcotics. You said you were overwhelmed. You stopped calling as much. Mom and Dad were already worried. That is not the same as being suspended for drug abuse," I said, my voice rising despite myself. I did not say that. She replied quickly. I told them what I was seeing. They drew their own conclusions. "Dad said you showed them proof." There was a pause long enough for me to hear her breathing. "I showed them screenshots," she said finally. "Messages where you said you were exhausted, that you felt like you could not keep going. You edited them," I said, the realization dawning like a bruise. She did not answer directly. "You should focus on your friend Irene. Let things cool down. If you keep pushing, you will only make it worse." "Worse than being disowned?" I asked. "You are not disowned," she said sharply. "They just need space from the lies." The call ended without resolution. On the third day, I mailed a certified letter to my parents' house. I included copies of every official document I had, the dean's signature, the hospital letter confirming Lauren's treatment. I wrote by hand at the bottom that I loved them, that I was still their daughter. 5 days later, the envelope came back to my apartment unopened. My mother's handwriting was on the front, neat and unmistakable. "Return to sender." I held that envelope for a long time before I set it down on the kitchen counter. In between calls and emails, Lauren's condition worsened. The chemo was aggressive. Some nights she could barely keep water down. I sat beside her hospital bed, tracking medication doses in a spiral notebook, triple-checking the numbers, as if precision in one part of my life could compensate for chaos in another. One afternoon, she caught me staring at my phone again. "Did they call back?" she asked gently. "No." She studied my face for a moment, then reached for my hand. "You cannot fix people who want to misunderstand you," she said. "That is not medicine. That is something else." I swallowed hard and nodded. By the fourth day, the rumors had already started to move beyond my parents. A cousin texted me late at night asking if I was safe. She said she had heard I was in trouble at school, that there had been some kind of investigation. A former church friend sent a message offering the name of a rehabilitation center in Arizona that had helped her nephew. I read each message in disbelief. Someone had given them a story detailed enough to sound credible. Not just that I had taken time off, that I had been caught misusing prescription medication, that the school had quietly removed me to avoid scandal, that my parents were devastated but handling it privately. I knew who had told it. On the fifth day, I called my Aunt Margaret. She was my father's younger sister and the only one in the family who had ever asked me real questions instead of polite ones. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything. The leave of absence, the accusations, the blocked calls. "I will talk to your father," she said firmly. "He cannot shut you out without at least checking the facts." 40 minutes later, she called back. "He told me to stay out of it," she said quietly. "He said you made your bed." He would not listen when I mentioned calling the school. I sat on the edge of my bed, the room dim, except for the streetlight outside. Something in me shifted, then not with a crash, but with a slow settling. This was not confusion. This was a choice. My parents had chosen the version of me that made sense to them, the one where pressure had cracked me, the one where I had shamed the family. It was a neater narrative than a daughter stepping outside their control and building something larger than their world. On the sixth day, I stopped calling, not because I had given up on them, because I understood that pleading would only confirm the picture Monica had painted. If I sounded desperate, it would sound like guilt. Lauren died in early December. The morning light was pale and thin through the hospice window. The monitor slowed gradually, as if easing itself into silence. I was the only one in the room. I held her hand and told her she had been brave, that she had mattered, that she had changed my life. When the nurse came in and turned off the machine, the quiet felt enormous. I organized a small service the following week. 6 people attended: 2 classmates, a hospice nurse, a neighbor from her building, and Aunt Margaret who drove 2 hours to stand beside me in the chapel. There were empty pews behind us. I delivered the eulogy without crying. I had already done my crying in hospital stairwells and late-night kitchens. I spoke about her stubborn humor, about the way she refused to let cancer define her. I did not mention that she had been the only person who believed me without needing proof. No one from my immediate family came, no card, no flowers. That night, I returned to the apartment we had shared. Her coffee mug was still on the counter, her textbooks stacked neatly by the couch. I opened my laptop and stared at the re-enrollment form for the spring semester. There were two options in front of me: collapse into the story that had been written about me, or finish what I had started. I filled out the form. If my parents believed I had destroyed my life, I would build one so solid that the lie would eventually crack under its own weight. I did not know then how long it would take. I only knew that I was no longer fighting to be believed. I was fighting to survive. Grief does not announce itself with drama. It settles into the corners of a room and waits for you to notice it. January in New Haven was gray and unforgiving. The campus looked the same as it had before. Lauren got sick, brick buildings, students hunched against the wind coffee cups in gloved hands, but I felt like I was walking through it without skin. I had buried my best friend, lost my family, and somehow the world had not paused. On my first day back, I stood outside the lecture hall for a full minute before going in. My classmates were talking about holiday trips and exam scores. No one knew what had happened in that hospice room. No one knew that my parents believed I was a disgrace. I took my seat and opened my notebook. The work did not soften for me. Anatomy lab clinical case reviews 12-hour rotations that bled into 14. I picked up a part-time research position in the evenings to help cover rent and loans. Some nights I ate crackers from the hospital cafeteria because I was too tired to cook. When I lay down at night, the silence was loud. There were no late calls from home, no messages asking how I was holding up. If my name came up in my parents' house, it was not in the way I had once hoped. A cousin left me a voicemail in February. She sounded awkward, almost embarrassed. "Irene, I just wanted to check in. I heard you're taking some time to get yourself sorted out. If you need anything, there are programs that can help." Programs? The word sat in my chest like a stone. I called her back and told her calmly that I was still enrolled, still attending rotations, still moving forward. There was a long pause on the other end. "That is not what we were told," she said carefully. I did not ask who told her. At church back home, my mother had asked for prayers for a struggling daughter. She had not said my name, but she did not need to. People filled in the blanks easily. It was a softer story than expulsion, but it carried the same shadow. Addiction, burnout, shame. Monica had not just planted a lie, she had cultivated it. Spring came, and with it my final year. I kept my head down and my grades high. I did not attend many social events. When classmates talked about family visits for graduation, I nodded and changed the subject. On graduation day, the auditorium was packed. Parents waving from balconies, cameras flashing bouquets of flowers in every direction. I walked across the stage in my gown and accepted my diploma with steady hands. I did not scan the crowd for my parents. I already knew they were not there. My phone stayed silent. Later that evening, I checked social media out of habit. My mother had posted a photo of the hardware store, a caption about resilience and family sticking together during hard times. There was no mention of me. I let that sink in quietly. I matched into a surgical residency program in Connecticut, competitive and demanding exactly what I had hoped for. The irony was not lost on me. I was returning to the same state where my family lived, but I did not tell them. I rented a small apartment outside Hartford and began the next chapter of my life, as if it existed in a different universe from theirs. Residency is a crucible. You are sleep-deprived, scrutinized, tested daily. You either fracture or harden. I hardened. In my second year, I met Daniel Caldwell at a community clinic attached to the hospital. He was a civil rights attorney volunteering legal hours for patients who could not afford representation. He had a calm way of listening that made you feel like your words mattered. We started with coffee after long shifts. He asked about my family once gently, and I surprised myself by telling him the whole story. The accusations, the blocked calls, the returned letter. He did not interrupt. He did not offer a quick fix. "You deserved better," he said simply. It was the first time anyone had framed it that way without hesitation. We married 2 years later in the backyard of my attending surgeon's home. It was a small ceremony, 30 people folding chairs on grass that had just turned green for the season. Daniel's father walked me down the aisle. I had sent an invitation to my parents, the envelope addressed in my careful handwriting. It came back unopened. I did not cry when I saw it. I placed it in a drawer with the returned certified letter and closed it. During my third year of residency, I was called into human resources. An anonymous complaint had been filed questioning my past conduct at Yale. The report claimed I had concealed a history of substance abuse and disciplinary action. The language was precise, not hysterical, structured. My hands did not shake when I read it. They went cold. The hospital conducted a review. They contacted Yale directly. Every record came back clean. No suspension, no investigation, no misconduct. The complaint was dismissed. Daniel used his contacts to trace the origin of the inquiry. It had come from an IP address in Albany. There are moments when clarity arrives without emotion. It simply lands. Monica was not afraid of me failing. She was afraid of me succeeding. If I thrived publicly, her story collapsed. If I rose high enough, someone might eventually ask why the daughter who had supposedly ruined her life was standing at the front of an operating room. So she kept feeding the narrative. Quietly, carefully. I did not confront her. I did not call home again. I did what I had learned to do best. I worked. By 36, I was appointed Chief of Trauma Surgery at Mercy Crest Medical Center, the first woman to hold the position in that department. My name appeared on hospital announcements, on research papers, on a plaque outside my office door. In Albany, my parents still believed I had fallen apart. Sometimes, on Thanksgiving, I would set the table in my own home, count the plates, and feel the absence like a phantom limb. Daniel would squeeze my hand and say, "We are building something real here." He was right. 5 years passed in this split reality. In one world, I was a surgeon with authority and a steady hand. In another, I was a cautionary tale whispered at church. I had stopped trying to bridge the two. Until the night the pager went off at 3 a.m. and everything collided. But that night had not arrived yet. At that point, I was still building brick by brick, a life that no one could erase even if they refused to see it. Residency did not give me time to dwell on what I had lost. It demanded that I decide who I was going to become. The first winter back in Connecticut was brutal. Snow piled against the hospital loading docks, and the wind cut straight through my coat when I crossed the parking lot before dawn. Trauma surgery does not care about holidays or personal history. When a car rolls, or a ladder slips, or a heart stops, someone has to step forward. I stepped forward. I learned to read a room in seconds. The smell of blood, the pitch of a monitor, the way a family member stands when they are about to hear something they do not want to hear. I became steady in ways I had never been before. There was no room for self-pity in an operating room. There was only the next decision. Daniel became the quiet counterweight to that intensity. He would meet me at the door after late shifts with a mug of tea and ask one simple question: how many today? He did not need details. He just needed to know whether I had carried too much. Sometimes I would tell him 3 surgeries, 1 loss. Other nights I would say all survived. He would nod and squeeze my hand like that was enough. The anonymous complaint to Human Resources lingered in the back of my mind even after it was dismissed. It had been worded too carefully to be random. Whoever wrote it knew enough about medical training to sound convincing. They knew how to frame doubt without sounding hysterical. When Daniel confirmed the inquiry traced back to Albany, I did not feel shock. I felt confirmation. "She is still telling it," I said quietly, standing in our kitchen with the envelope in my hand. Daniel did not ask who. He already knew. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Nothing, I said after a long pause. "I want to outlive it." That became my strategy, not confrontation, not a dramatic reveal. I would build something so visible that eventually the lie would look absurd. By the time I was 36, I had earned a reputation in the trauma bay: calm under pressure, precise, unflinching. The younger residents watched me closely during complicated cases. The board chair shook my hand one evening after a difficult surgery and said, "You are setting a new standard here." When the official announcement came that I had been appointed Chief of Trauma Surgery, I read it twice before forwarding it to Daniel. I did not send it to my parents. I did not send it to anyone in Albany. The hospital posted my name outside a corner office with a small brass plaque: Dr. Irene Woulette, Chief of Trauma Surgery. The letters felt heavy in a way that had nothing to do with ego. They felt earned. A week after the announcement, I received a call from my Aunt Margaret. "I heard something interesting at church," she said carefully. "Your mother told someone you were still trying to get your life back on track out west." Out west. I leaned back in my office chair and stared at the diplomas on the wall. "I am in Hartford, Aunt Margaret. I have been here for years." There was a long silence on the line. "They do not know that," she said finally. I pictured my parents sitting at the kitchen table nodding sympathetically as someone asked about their troubled younger daughter. I pictured Monica offering soft explanations about my struggles, about how hard they had tried. The lie had grown roots. "Do you want me to tell them?" Margaret asked. "No," I said. "Not yet." It was not mercy. It was timing. That summer, the hospital nominated me for Physician of the Year. It was not public yet, just an internal recognition. I tried not to think about it. I focused on cases, on staffing schedules, on keeping the department steady. On Thanksgiving, Daniel and I hosted a small dinner, 4 plates on the table, his father, an old family friend, and us. I found myself counting automatically, an old habit from childhood. 4 felt both small and sufficient. There are moments when you believe the past has settled into something manageable, a scar that no longer aches unless pressed. That winter, I almost believed it. Then the pager went off at 3 in the morning. Level 1 trauma, female, mid-40s, high-speed motor vehicle collision, severe internal bleeding. I was dressed and in my car within minutes. The roads were slick, the sky black and indifferent. I ran through the checklist in my head the way I always did. Mechanism of injury, possible organ damage, surgical priorities. The ambulance bay doors burst open as I stepped inside. Paramedics wheeled in a gurney, fast voices sharp with urgency. Blood soaked through the front of the patient's blouse. Her face was pale under the fluorescent lights. I reached for the intake tablet without looking at her first. I have learned that sometimes it is easier to process information before emotion. Name: Monica Woolette. For a fraction of a second, the noise around me dulled. The hallway, the beeping monitors, the shuffle of feet, it all receded. Then training took over. "Prep operating room 2, I said. "Call anesthesia, get blood ready." Behind the gurney, I saw them. My mother in a bathrobe thrown over pajamas. My father in a flannel shirt and jeans, his face drained of color. They were shouting questions at a nurse asking for the chief surgeon. "The chief is already here," the nurse replied. They had not seen me yet. I stepped into the scrub room alone. I turned on the faucet and let the water run over my hands, hot and steady. In the stainless steel reflection, I saw a woman in surgical blues with a badge pinned at her chest. The name was clear: Dr. Irene Woolette. There are moments when life presents you with a choice that is not about emotion, but about integrity. I documented the conflict of interest in the chart. I called in a second, attending to stand by. If my judgment faltered for even a second, he would take over. Then I walked into the operating room. Monica lay on the table unconscious, her chest rising unevenly. The monitor numbers were dropping too fast. "Scalpel," I said. The surgery lasted 3 hours and 40 minutes. A ruptured spleen, a deep liver laceration, internal bleeding that had to be controlled in stages. My hands moved without hesitation. Clamp, suction, suture, adjust. I did not think about Christmas dinners or return letters. I thought about anatomy and survival. When the final stitch was placed and her vitals stabilized, I stepped back and let out a breath I had been holding for hours. She was alive. An attending leaned toward me and asked if he should update the family. "No," I said. "I will speak to them." I removed my gloves and washed my hands slowly. The hallway outside the operating room was quiet in that early morning way hospitals sometimes are suspended between crisis and exhaustion. 5 years of silence stood on the other side of those doors. I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the waiting room. The waiting room lights were too bright for that hour, the kind of brightness that makes everything look exposed and tired. My parents were sitting in the second row of plastic chairs, shoulders, rigid hands clasped so tightly their knuckles were pale. My mother's hair was unbrushed, her bathrobe tied unevenly. My father's jaw was set in the way I remembered from childhood, the way he looked when something had gone wrong at the store, and he was trying to contain it. They both stood when the doors opened. My father, began stepping forward. "How is she?" His eyes dropped to my badge. For a moment, he did not process it. He looked at my face, then back at the badge, then back at my face again. Recognition moved slowly across his features like a storm rolling in from a distance. My mother made a small sound, almost a gasp, and her hand shot out to grab his forearm. She gripped him so tightly I could see the fabric of his flannel bunch under her fingers. I stood a few feet away still in surgical scrubs, mask hanging loose at my neck. "Mr. and Mrs. Woolette," I said evenly. "I am Dr. Irene Woolette, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Your daughter sustained a ruptured spleen and a significant liver laceration in the collision. We removed the spleen and repaired the liver. She is stable and being transferred to the intensive care unit. You will be able to see her within the hour. I watched the words land. Mr. and Mrs. Willett, not Mom, not Dad. You are a doctor, my father said, the sentence breaking apart halfway through. I am. You are the chief? Yes. He looked past me for a second, as if expecting someone else to step forward and explain the mistake. My mother's eyes filled with tears that did not fall. But Monica said she whispered. What exactly did Monica say? I asked quietly. That you left school, that you were suspended, that you were not practicing medicine. I held his gaze. I graduated with honors. I completed my surgical residency here in Connecticut. I have been chief of this department for 2 years. A nurse walked past behind me and nodded respectfully. Dr. Willett, the board chair, called earlier. He asked to pass along his congratulations on tonight's outcome. I nodded once and thanked her. My parents heard every word. My father swayed slightly, like the ground beneath him had shifted. My mother released his arm and took a step toward me, her hands half raised as if to reach for me. Irene, she said, her voice breaking, we thought. I took a small step back. Not dramatic, just enough. You thought I was stealing medication, I said calmly. You thought I had been expelled. You thought I was lying about taking care of Lauren? They both stared at me, confusion and shame mixing in their expressions. Lauren, my mother repeated faintly. She died 5 years ago, I said. I was on an approved caregiver leave when you cut me off. My father's face drained further. We saw emails, he said. We saw proof from the school. You saw what you were shown. I replied, I sent you 14 calls in 5 days, 2 emails with official documentation attached, 1 certified letter that you returned unopened. My mother pressed her hand to her mouth. I remember the envelope, she said, her voice barely audible. You sent it back, I said. Silence settled heavily between us. Around us, the waiting room remained still, other families pretending not to listen, but hearing every word. This is not the place, my father said finally, his old instinct returning. Your sister is in the ICU. I just spent 3 hours and 40 minutes making sure she survived, I said. I am aware of where she is. His shoulders dropped slightly. For the first time in my life, he did not have a command ready. My mother sank into one of the chairs. Her hands trembled in her lap. We thought you were in trouble, she said. Monica showed us messages. She said you were picking up narcotics, that you were spiraling. I was picking up pain medication for a dying friend, I said. Under a physician's orders, logged, documented, approved. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I could hear the distant roll of a gurney down the corridor. 5 years, I continued, my voice steady, not raised. 5 years of silence. You blocked my number. You told relatives I had abandoned you. You let people pray for my addiction in church. My father closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again as if forcing himself to look at me fully for the first time. Why did you not come home? He asked the question, sounding hollow, even to his own ears. You told me not to call until I was ready to tell the truth, I said. I was telling the truth. My mother began to cry, then not loudly, not theatrically, just a quiet unraveling. We were wrong, she whispered. The words hung there. They did not fix anything. They did not erase 5 Thanksgivings or the empty chair at my wedding, but they existed. A nurse stepped into the doorway and informed them Monica was being moved to ICU. They stood automatically. You can see her in room 6 in about 15 minutes, I said, slipping back into clinical tone. My mother looked at me as if she wanted to say more to reach across 5 years in one sentence. My father simply nodded, a small motion that seemed to cost him. As they walked toward the ICU corridor, my mother turned once and said, Irene. I met her eyes. We need to talk, she said. We will, I replied. Not tonight. They disappeared down the hall, smaller than I remembered. I stood there for a long moment after they were gone. My heart was pounding not from surgery, but from something deeper, older. 5 years of being erased had collided with 3 hours of saving a life. A colleague approached quietly. You okay? He asked. I am fine, I said. And for the first time, I realized that it was true in a way it had not been before. I was no longer the daughter begging to be believed. I was the surgeon they had just relied on. Down the corridor in room 6, my sister was waking up, and the story she had built was about to meet the light. The ICU smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm plastic, the steady rhythm of monitors, replacing the chaos of the trauma bay. Monica lay propped slightly on her side, pale against the white sheets, an oxygen line resting beneath her nose. The bruising along her forehead had already begun to darken. Tubes ran from her arms, and a drain line curved carefully from beneath the surgical dressing on her abdomen. For a moment, she looked smaller than I remembered, less certain. My parents stood on either side of the bed when I entered. My mother held Monica's hand as if she were afraid it might slip away. My father watched the monitor numbers as if he could will them to stay steady. I stepped in with a chart in my hand, my tone measured. "She is stable," I said. "The bleeding has been controlled. The next 24 hours are critical, but we expect a full recovery if there are no complications." Monica's eyelids fluttered. Slowly, heavily, they opened. Her gaze drifted across the ceiling, first unfocused, then moved toward the sound of my voice. She blinked once, then again, and I saw the moment recognition registered. "Irene." She whispered the word, dry and rough. "Good morning, Monica," I said evenly. "I am your attending surgeon." Her eyes moved to the badge clipped to my scrubs. She stared at it longer this time, as if willing it to change. "You are really the chief," she murmured. "I have been for 2 years." My mother let out a soft sob, squeezing Monica's hand tighter. My father remained silent, but I could feel his attention shift between us. Monica swallowed, wincing slightly at the movement. "I did not know," she said. "I did not know you were here." That much was obvious. "You're lucky," I continued, my voice calm. "The rupture was severe. If you had arrived 10 minutes later, the outcome might have been different." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "I'm sorry," she said faintly. "Sorry for the accident I asked, or for something else." My parents stiffened. Monica's gaze flickered toward them. "I tried to protect you," she said quickly, her voice gaining urgency despite the weakness. "I thought you were in trouble. You said you were overwhelmed. You were picking up narcotics." For a moment, the room was quiet except for the beeping monitor. "I was picking up pain medication prescribed to a cancer patient under a physician's supervision," I said. "That is documented, logged, verified." My father shifted his weight. "Monica," he said slowly, "did you tell us she was suspended?" Monica's eyes filled with tears. "I told you what she told me, that she could not handle the pressure, that she was stepping away." "You said there was an investigation," my mother whispered. Monica hesitated. "I might have misunderstood something I saw online." "Online?" I repeated. She was lying in a hospital bed with a surgical scar down her abdomen, and she was still calculating. I reached into the folder I had brought with me and set it on the tray table beside her bed. I requested our compliance department pull every record tied to my name from Yale, I said. There was no suspension, no disciplinary action, no inquiry. I also spoke to the dean this morning. He remembers approving my caregiver leave personally. Monica's jaw tightened. At that moment, the door opened and Aunt Margaret stepped inside. She looked older than I remembered, her shoulders straighter than usual, as if bracing for impact. She held a manila envelope in her hands. "Irene called me," she said, her eyes moving between us. I thought it was time. She placed the envelope on the bed and pulled out several documents. My caregiver leave approval with the university seal, a copy of my graduation program, a photograph from my residency ceremony with Aunt Margaret standing beside me. I kept everything she said quietly, in case the day came when we needed it. My mother reached for the papers with shaking hands. "There is one more thing," Margaret added. She pulled out her phone and scrolled for a moment before holding it up so everyone could see. "This is a message Monica sent me 4 years ago," she said. "She asked me not to tell you about Irene's residency because it would only confuse you." Margaret read the text aloud. "Do not tell Mom and Dad about her matching in Connecticut. They finally accepted she ruined her life." The room went still. My father's face drained of color. My mother covered her mouth. Monica's breathing quickened, the monitor responding with a sharper rhythm. "I was trying to keep peace," she said quickly. "They were hurting. I thought it was kinder not to reopen everything." Kinder, my father repeated, his voice low and unsteady. "You told us she forged documents, that she stole medication, that she lied about cancer." "I never said she lied about cancer," Monica protested weakly. "You implied it," I said. "You told them I had a story ready." My father turned to me then, and something in his posture shifted. "Did you ever steal medication?" he asked directly. "No," I said. "Not once." He looked back at Monica. "Did you fabricate an email from Yale?" he asked her. Monica's eyes darted between us. "I forwarded something I found online," she said, her voice thin. "You told us it came from the dean," my mother said, her tears falling freely now. Silence filled the space where certainty had lived for 5 years. "I never called the school," my father said slowly, as if the admission surprised him. "I never verified anything." The weight of that sentence pressed against all of us. Monica's tears came harder now, but they were different from the earlier ones. Less performative, more cornered. You were going to be everything she said suddenly, her voice cracking. Yale? Surgery? Everyone praising you? I was supposed to be the steady one? The responsible one? I could not lose that. Lose what I asked quietly. My place, she whispered. The room felt smaller. I am not here to destroy you, I said after a long pause. I did my job tonight. I saved your life because that is what I am trained to do. Monica looked at the bandage on her abdomen, then back at me. But the lie ends now, I continued. You will write to every family member you told otherwise. You will tell them I was never expelled, never addicted, never a disgrace. You will send it to all of them. My father did not object. My mother nodded slowly, as if bracing herself for the ripple. Monica closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. I will, she said. The monitor settled back into a steady rhythm. I looked at her for a long moment. You carry my surgical scar now, I said quietly. I have carried yours for 5 years. There was nothing left to say in that room. I stepped back toward the door. Behind me, my parents remained standing on either side of the bed, their certainty shattered their daughter alive because of the one they had cast out. Outside the ICU window, the sky was beginning to lighten, and the rest of the family had no idea yet that everything they believed was about to change. The email went out on a Wednesday night. I was sitting at the kitchen table with Daniel across from me, a mug of coffee growing cold between my hands. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of traffic in the distance. My phone buzzed once. Family update. That was the subject line. For a moment, I did not open it. I just stared at the screen, feeling the weight of 5 years condensed into one small notification. Daniel watched me carefully. You do not have to read it right now, he said. I shook my head and tapped the screen. It was 3 paragraphs long. No dramatic language, no excuses. Monica admitted that she had fabricated claims about my being expelled from medical school. She admitted that she had altered screenshots of text messages to imply substance abuse. She admitted that she had told our parents I was under investigation and that I had refused help. She wrote that I had never abandoned the family, that she had made sure they believed I did. It was clear, direct, uncomfortable. I exhaled slowly. Within minutes, the replies began. Uncle Thomas wrote first, I do not know what to say. I am stunned. Cousin Rebecca followed with a longer message, apologizing for repeating the rehab story at a book club 2 years earlier. She said she had believed it because it sounded plausible, because everyone else seemed to accept it as fact. A few responses were short and cautious. Some were silent. My grandmother called before I had finished reading through the thread. Her voice was thin but steady. Irene, she said, I am 89 years old, and I have never been lied to so thoroughly by my own blood. There was anger in her tone, but it was not directed at me. You do not owe me an apology, Nana, I said gently. You were told a story that sounded convincing. She was quiet for a moment. I should have asked you directly, she said. We all should have asked more questions, I replied. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair and let the wave move through me. Not triumph, not exactly relief, something steadier. The kind of clarity that comes when a light is finally turned on in a room that has been dark too long. By the next morning, the family group thread had fallen silent. There was no explosion, no public shaming, just a shift in tone. Invitations that had once automatically gone through Monica now rerouted. A Thanksgiving planning message that did not ask her to coordinate. A quiet recalibration of trust. No one declared her exiled. They simply stopped believing her. That was enough. My parents did not call me that night. They waited until Sunday. We met at a diner halfway between Albany and Hartford Neutral Ground with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that never quite cooled. My father looked older than he had in the hospital waiting room, as if the past week had added years to his face. My mother's eyes were still swollen from crying. We ordered out of habit eggs and toast, nothing elaborate. Your sister sent the email, my father said after the waitress left. I know. He folded his hands on the table, staring at them as if they might offer guidance. We read every word, he continued. We called the dean. He confirmed everything. My mother reached across the table but stopped short of touching me. I should have called you back 5 years ago, she said. I should have listened. You chose the version that felt easier, I said quietly. It was simpler to believe I had failed than to question the person standing in front of you. My father winced slightly. We trusted her, he said. You trusted her more than you verified me, I replied. He nodded once. There was no defense in him anymore. "What do you need from us now?" my mother asked. I considered that carefully. "Consistency," I said. "Not a dramatic apology, not a public show. Counseling, both of you. You need to understand why you accepted a lie about your own daughter without checking." My father's jaw tightened instinctively, then relaxed. "We have already made an appointment," he said. Thursday. That surprised me. "We are afraid of losing you again?" my mother added softly. The honesty in that statement settled between us. "I am not the girl you cut off," I said. "I built a life without you. If you want to be part of it now, it will be on new terms." My father met my eyes fully for the first time. "That is fair," he said. There was no hug at the diner, no theatrical reconciliation, just a quiet agreement that rebuilding would take time. When I returned home that afternoon, Daniel was in the backyard trimming the hedges. He looked up as I stepped out of the car. "How did it go?" he asked. "They are starting," I said. "That is all I can say right now." He nodded and came over to take the grocery bag from my hands. "And Monica?" he asked. "She texted once this morning. She said she scheduled therapy. And nothing," I said. "Change takes time." That night alone in my office at the hospital, I looked at the plaque on my door. Chief of Trauma Surgery. 5 years ago, that title would have sounded impossible in the middle of the storm that had swallowed me. I did not get revenge. I did not need to. The lie unraveled because it could not withstand daylight. Somewhere in Albany, my sister was learning what it felt like to be doubted. And somewhere in Hartford, my parents were sitting in a therapist's office for the first time in their marriage. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a small, steady breath. The past had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled the narrative, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. February arrived with a thin layer of snow that never quite stuck, just enough to make everything look quieter than it really was. My parents started therapy that week. I did not attend the first session. That was intentional. This was not about performing remorse for me. It was about them sitting in a room with a professional and hearing their own decisions out loud. My mother called afterward. Her voice sounded raw. "We met with Dr. Klein," she said. "She asked us why we never called the university ourselves." "And what did you say?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Your father said he trusted his eldest daughter. And you, Mom." I said I did not want conflict. I thought if we cut you off, it would settle. That it would protect the family reputation. Family reputation. The phrase had followed me since childhood like a shadow. Dr. Klein asked me what reputation we were protecting. My mother continued, and I did not have an answer. I could picture her sitting in a softly lit office, hands folded tightly in her lap. "What about Dad?" I asked. He did not like being questioned. That did not surprise me. But he stayed, she added quickly. He did not walk out. That was something. The following week, I agreed to join them for one session. The office was in West Hartford, neutral walls, 2 chairs angled toward a couch. My father sat stiffly at one end. My mother held a tissue in her hand before we even began. Dr. Klein was calm, deliberate, the kind of woman who asked direct questions and then waited without filling the silence. "Irene," she said, "what did it feel like when your parents stopped responding?" "Like being erased," I answered. Not argued with, not disagreed with, just erased. My father's jaw tightened. "We thought you were lying," he said. "You never checked," I replied evenly. "You never once called the dean. You never once asked for documentation directly from the school. Monica showed us proof," he insisted weakly. "Proof you did not verify." Dr. Klein leaned forward slightly. "What made it easier to believe Monica over Irene?" she asked him. My father hesitated. "She has always been steady," he said. "Responsible?" "I am a surgeon," I said quietly. "I have been responsible for lives for years." He flinched at that. "You were far away." He continued, searching for something solid. "You were not here. So distance equals guilt?" I asked. Silence again. Dr. Klein let it stretch. My mother spoke first. "We have always relied on Monica to manage things," she said softly. "She handled holidays. She handled family communication. We trusted her narrative." Narrative. That word hung in the air. And when her narrative made Irene look unstable, Dr. Klein pressed gently, "You did not consider that narrative might serve her." My father exhaled slowly. "No," he admitted. For the first time in that room, I saw him not as the man who cut me off, but as a man confronting his own blind spots. "I am not here to punish you," I said. "I need to know that if something like this ever happens again, you will ask questions. Directly. We will?" my mother said immediately. My father nodded. We will. After the session, we stood awkwardly in the parking lot. No one quite knew what to do with their hands. Your mother mentioned the hospital gala next month, my father said finally. The award ceremony. Physician of the Year. Yes, I said. We would like to attend, he continued, if that is acceptable to you. I studied him for a moment. You can come, I said. But you sit in the back. No speeches, no introductions. You are there to observe, not to claim. He swallowed and nodded. That is fair. When the night of the gala arrived, the ballroom at the Hartford Regency was filled with familiar faces. Colleagues in suits and evening dresses, donors, board members, my surgical team. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table as the master of ceremonies stepped to the podium. I felt calm, not because my parents were there, but because I knew who I was with or without them. When my name was announced, the applause felt warm and steady. I walked to the stage in a simple navy dress heels, clicking softly against the polished floor. I kept my speech short. 5 years ago, I almost walked away from medicine, I said. Not because I doubted my skill, but because I doubted my place in the world. What I learned is that your place is not granted by other people's approval. It is built by your own persistence. I looked briefly toward the back of the room. My parents were seated side by side. My mother's hands were clasped tightly. My father sat upright, eyes fixed on the stage. You cannot control who believes in you, I continued, but you can control the life you build. The applause rose again. Afterward, as people milled around the ballroom, my father approached Daniel near the coat check. I watched from a distance. I should have been the one to walk her down the aisle, my father said quietly. Daniel held his gaze. You were not, he replied gently. But you can still show up now. My father nodded, eyes glassy but unshed. Later that evening, my mother hugged me in the hallway outside the ballroom. It was not dramatic, just a quiet embrace. We are proud of you, she whispered. That word had once been oxygen to me. Now it felt like a gift I did not depend on. 2 weeks later, Monica asked to meet. We chose a coffee shop in Middletown, neutral territory. Daniel came with me but sat at a table near the window, giving us space. Monica looked thinner, her surgical scar still healing beneath her sweater. She wrapped her hands around a paper cup and avoided my eyes at first. I'm not going to pretend I did not mean to hurt you, she said. I did. Why, I asked simply. Because you were going to surpass me, she replied. Yale, surgery, recognition. I had built my identity around being the capable one. If you became more, I did not know who I would be. So you destroyed my reputation, I said. I panicked, she admitted. And then it spiraled. There was no self-righteous tone left in her voice, just exhaustion. I am not cutting you out, I told her. But trust is rebuilt with actions, not apologies. She nodded. You will continue therapy. You will correct the narrative whenever it surfaces. And you will not speak about me without my knowledge. I understand. For the first time, she did not argue. When I left the coffee shop that afternoon, the air was crisp and bright. Daniel met me by the car. How do you feel, he asked. Like something is finally balanced, I said. Not perfect, but balanced. That night, I stood in my kitchen looking at the empty table. 4 chairs, 4 plates. Not yet, but soon. And for the first time, the idea did not make me anxious. March settled in with longer evenings and a softness in the air that hinted at spring, even if the trees were still bare. The first time my parents came to my house, they stood on the porch for a full 30 seconds before ringing the bell. I watched them through the front window. My father held a carton of orange juice like it was a peace offering. My mother clutched a tin of shortbread cookies wrapped in a dish towel. The same cookies she used to bake for Monica's school fundraisers, never mine. I opened the door. Hi, Mom. Hi, Irene, she said, her voice nervous and hopeful at the same time. Dad cleared his throat. We did not want to come empty-handed. You do not have to bring anything, I replied gently. Just come in. They stepped inside, slowly looking around the foyer as if cataloging evidence of the life I had built without them. The framed photos, the quiet order, the subtle signs of stability. Daniel came from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Mr. and Mrs. Woolette, he said warmly, it is good to see you. My father nodded. Thank you for having us. I led them to the kitchen. The sunlight filtered in through the windows, landing on the wooden table that had become the center of my life. Work calls taken there, late-night conversations, quiet Sunday mornings. Mom set the cookie tin down carefully. We have been in counseling for 6 weeks now, she said almost immediately, as if she had rehearsed it. That is good, I answered. Dad pulled out a chair but did not sit until I did. A small change, but I noticed. Dr. Klein asked us to reflect on patterns, he said, on favoritism, on how we respond to conflict. And what did you find? I asked. He looked uncomfortable, then honest. I tend to double down when I believe I'm right, he admitted. I do not revisit decisions. It makes me feel weak, and cutting me off felt strong, I said quietly. It felt decisive, he corrected himself. I thought I was protecting the family. Protecting it from what, Dad? From embarrassment, he said after a pause. From gossip. From the idea that one of my daughters might fail publicly. I let that sit. You were more afraid of what people would say than of losing me, I said. His shoulders dropped slightly. Yes. Mom reached for my hand this time, and I let her take it. I chose peace over fairness, she said. I let your father lead. I let Monica speak for you. I convinced myself that you were resilient enough to survive on your own. I was resilient, I replied, but I should not have had to be. There was no arguing with that. Daniel set plates on the table and poured coffee for everyone. The normalcy of the act steadied the room. After a few minutes of small talk about work and the weather, Dad spoke again. We would like to come for Easter dinner, if that's all right. Easter had always been held at their house. A long table polished silver, Monica orchestrating seating arrangements. This would be different. You can come, I said, but we keep it small, just us. He nodded immediately. That is fair. Later that afternoon, after they left, I stood in the doorway watching their car pull away. I did not feel the old ache. I felt cautious hope. 2 days later, Monica called. Her voice sounded steadier than it had at the coffee shop. I told Dr. Reynolds everything she said, about the screenshots, about altering the messages, and he asked me what I was trying to gain. What did you say? Control, she admitted. If I controlled the story, I controlled my place. There was a long silence between us. I am not asking for forgiveness, she added. I just want you to know I'm not running from it anymore. That mattered more than any dramatic apology. We are having Easter at my house, I told her. You are welcome to come, but it is not your event to manage. It is mine. I understand. When Easter Sunday arrived, the sky was clear and bright. I roasted a chicken, set the table with simple white plates, nothing ornate. Daniel moved quietly around the kitchen, giving me space when I needed it. The doorbell rang at noon. Mom and Dad entered first coats neatly folded over their arms. Monica followed a few steps behind them. She looked thinner still, the faint stiffness in her movements reminding me of the surgery. For a moment, we all stood there in the living room, unsure of choreography. Then Dad spoke. Where can I help? Set the table, I said. He nodded and moved to the cabinet without being told twice. Mom carried a bowl of green beans into the kitchen. Monica hovered near the doorway. Can I do anything? She asked carefully. You can slice the bread, I replied. It was a small task but intentional. We sat down at 1 o'clock. 4 plates, 4 glasses, 4 sets of silverware. No one spoke for the first minute. The weight of history sat at the center of the table. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. I want to say something before we eat. I felt Daniel's hand brush mine under the table. I was wrong, Dad continued. I chose the easier narrative. I did not verify. I did not listen. And I hurt you. He looked directly at me. I am sorry. The words were simple. No excuses attached. Mom reached for his hand. We are both sorry, she said. Monica stared down at her plate. I am working on not being the person who needed to lie, she said quietly. I took a slow breath. We are not pretending the last 5 years did not happen, I said. We are not erasing them. But we can decide what happens next. No one argued. We bowed our heads for a brief prayer, something my father insisted on for decades. When he finished, his voice trembled slightly. As we began to eat, conversation shifted to lighter topics. Hospital updates, a story from Daniel's firm, a neighbor's new dog. It was not perfect. It was not effortless. But it was real. After dessert, Mom helped me wash dishes while Monica dried them. The rhythm of passing plates back and forth felt strangely intimate. Thank you for letting us be here, Mom whispered. I did not answer right away. Thank you for showing up, I said finally. When they left that evening, the house felt full rather than drained. Daniel wrapped his arms around me in the kitchen. How are you holding up? He asked softly. I am not angry anymore, I said. I am careful. Careful is good. I looked at the table one more time before turning off the lights. 4 plates, not symbolic, not dramatic, just evidence that something broken had not shattered beyond repair. And for the first time in 5 years, I allowed myself to believe that the door I had closed might stay open, not because I needed it to, but because I chose to. Summer came slowly that year, as if even the seasons were cautious about moving too fast. By June, the maple tree in our front yard was full and green, casting a wide shadow across the porch where Daniel liked to sit in the evenings. Life had settled into something steady. Not the old normal, a different one. My parents continued therapy. They did not miss a session. Sometimes my mother would call afterward and tell me what they talked about: boundaries, accountability, the difference between love and control. My father spoke less about it, but he showed up. That was his language now. Monica kept going to her own therapist as well. She did not overshare. She did not perform progress. She simply showed up to family dinners without trying to manage them. That alone was a change. One Saturday afternoon in early July, my phone buzzed while I was watering the flowers by the front steps. It was my father. "Can we come by tomorrow morning?" he asked, nothing formal, just coffee. Yes, I said. Sunday arrived warm and bright. I set the table on the porch this time. 4 mugs, a plate of pastries from the bakery down the street. Nothing elaborate. They arrived on time. Dad wore a short-sleeve button-down shirt, slightly wrinkled like he had changed his mind twice before settling on it. Mom carried strawberries in a glass bowl. Monica came alone, walking a few steps behind them. The scar from surgery had faded to a thin line beneath her blouse, but I knew it was there. She knew it too. We sat down together. For a while, we talked about ordinary things: the heat, a neighbor who had moved away, a story from the hospital about a young resident who fainted during her first trauma case. Then Dad leaned back in his chair and looked at me carefully. "I used to think being a good father meant being decisive," he said, "making quick judgments, standing firm." He paused. I'd not realized that sometimes being a good father means asking one more question. The admission was simple: no drama, no tears. It landed anyway. Mom reached across the table and brushed her fingers over my wrist. "I kept the letter you wrote 5 years ago," she said quietly. "The one we returned unopened." I felt the air shift slightly. "You kept it," I repeated. "I found it in a drawer after everything came out," she said. I read it this time. Every word. "What did it say?" Dad asked, his voice careful. I could have recited it from memory. "It said I graduated, that I wished you were there, that I never stopped being your daughter." My father closed his eyes briefly. "I missed your wedding," he said. "I missed your graduation. I missed years I cannot get back. We cannot undo that," I said. "No," he agreed. "But we can show up now." Monica cleared her throat softly. "I have something too," she said. We all looked at her. "I have been volunteering at the oncology unit in Albany," she continued. "Once a week. I do not tell anyone about it. I just go." The words caught me off guard. "Why?" I asked. "Because I lied about someone who was sick," she said. "I turned your friend's illness into a weapon. I cannot undo that either. But I can sit with people who are actually fighting." The porch was quiet except for the faint sound of birds in the trees. I did not know what to say at first. "That matters," I said finally. Quietly, "It matters." No one applauded her. No one rushed to absolve her. But the air felt different. We finished our coffee slowly. Before they left, Dad stood near the steps and looked back at the house. "I am proud of you," he said. 5 years ago, I would have needed that sentence. Now it felt like a gift, not oxygen. "Thank you," I replied. After they drove away, Daniel stepped out onto the porch and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "You look peaceful," he said. "I think I am," I answered. The truth did not explode our family. It did not burn everything down. It simply stood in the middle of the room until we had no choice but to look at it. I did not get revenge. I built a life so solid that when the lie collapsed, I was still standing. If you have ever been misunderstood in your own family, if you have ever watched a lie take root because it was easier than the truth, I want you to remember something. You do not have to shout to be heard. You do not have to destroy anyone to reclaim your name. Build your life, hold your boundaries, let the truth do its quiet work. And when the knock finally comes at your door, you get to decide whether it opens. 4 chairs on the porch, 4 mugs cooling in the summer air. Not perfect, but real. If this story felt close to home for you, if it reminded you of something you lived through or are still carrying, tell me where you are watching from and what part stayed with you the most. And if you believe in second chances that are earned, not demanded, stay with me for the next story. I will see you there. Disclaimer: this video is created solely for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. While we strive to ensure our content is thoughtful and well-researched, it is based on publicly available sources, including news articles, social media discussions, public forums, editorial analyses, and user-generated content. Please note that we do not guarantee absolute accuracy, nor do we claim to provide official, definitive, or exhaustive information. This content does not constitute professional advice of any kind. We strongly encourage viewers to perform their own fact-checking and consult reliable sources before forming opinions or making decisions. Our intent. This content is not intended to discredit, defame, or harm any individual group, entity, or nation. Instead, our goal is to present diverse perspectives, raise awareness, and foster respectful dialogue and deeper reflection on the world around us. We invite you to approach all content with a critical mind and an open heart. Thank you for watching and for being a valued member of our community.